I'm trying. It's not like I'm not trying, Brohinsky. I'm trying hard.
Live from Beit Shemesh and broadcasted around the world, you are listening to the From Entrepreneur podcast with your host, Nahum Kligman. Interviews and advice from Jewish entrepreneurs from around the world. Listen, learn, be Matzliach.
Welcome, fellow entrepreneurs, to another episode of the From Entrepreneur podcast, episode 61. This one is the longest episode I've ever recorded, and mostly because it's really two parts. I was going to split it up into two parts, but I said, you know what, you guys could pause it, listen to it at your leisure. But the first part is about Zalman Goldstein himself, his history, his publishing company, his business. Really fascinating, his history, really incredible stuff. But the second part is his brother has been in the news lately. His brother is Rabbi Yisroel Goldstein, who is the Chabad Rabbi of Poway in San Diego, who was recently shot in an attack on the Chabad House. And a really fascinating story. He went to meet the president with his brother, and I go through in all the details, the people, how the call came from the president. Remember, they had a 15-minute call before they went to Washington, how they found out about going to Washington, when he was asked to speak, how it was meeting the president, his private conversations. Really, really fascinating behind-the-scenes look. So this is going to be a fantastic episode. It is a bit long, but enjoy it. But first, before we get started, just a word from our sponsor.
You gotta book like a boss.
Looking to make more money? Do you sell services or want to earn extra cash on the side? Book Like a Boss is the ultimate software to sell services and book appointments. You get your own custom webpage, which includes everything you need. Book Like a Boss integrates with your existing calendars, sends reminder emails, is fast, secure, simple to use, and looks great on mobile. Visit booklikeaboss.com and get started for free.
Welcome to another awesome episode of the From Entrepreneur. I am super excited about our guest today, Zalman Goldstein. You may not have heard of him yet, but you probably have seen his works, and you've definitely heard of his brother, which we'll get to in this episode. It's really incredible. Some of you know that I do some consulting. I have like one or two clients that I take a month, and Zalman was a fan of this podcast, and now he gets to be on this podcast. And he reached out to me, and we did some consulting together. And, I'm very, very inspired by him and by his story and the work that he does in publishing and other things. And he actually was here. He was visiting me in Israel. He was in Israel about a month ago or 2 months ago or so, and I got to meet him in person, which was great. And then I wasn't really in touch with him until I got a picture that he sent over to me with the President of the United States of America. And I was like, and then all of a sudden things just like, oh my gosh, Zalman Goldstein is brothers with Yisroel Goldstein, who we now know, is world famous now, or, not for the best of reasons, but we're going to hear a little bit about that story, about what happened. He's the Rav of the Chabad of Poway and in San Diego. And so we'll hear all about that. But I wanted to get Zalman on the show even before his brother became famous. And so, Zalman, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So, Zalman, thank God we've had opportunities to talk in the past, and I've been very impressed with your publishing. First of all, just to let people know, it's called the Jewish Learning Group. So if you go, and I'll put the links in the page, but if you want to check out the website, it's jewishlearninggroup.com, and you publish everything from music to books. You've the Silly World of Chelm is something that you reproduced. That business model that we've talked about in the past. About there's so much great Jewish content out there that's sitting there and collecting dust that this next generation is just missing out on, and you're repurposing it or taking it and refreshing it, and really incredible work. But first, before we go and dive into more about what you're doing, let's go a little bit into your history. Where did you grow up? Where you're from, and what led you to get into publishing and into music as well. and a bunch of other things. I remember the first time we spoke, you just kept blowing me away with more and more things you're involved in. Pretty exciting story. So let's share it with everybody. So where are you from originally?
Thank you, Nachum. Before I start, I just wanted to say I love everything you've done with this podcast, and I loved meeting you. I think everything you're doing for Klal Yisrael is just amazing. The people you interview, the information you put out there is just really special. And the conversational style that you have and your heart comes across. So I'm just honored to be here, and thank you for giving that opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I deeply appreciate that.
My pleasure. So I grew up in Crown Heights, the youngest of 10, and went through Lubavitcher Yeshiva on Ocean Parkway, followed by some yeshiva shlichus out of town,
Where'd you go?
starting in Australia, Sydney, Australia.
Wow.
In the 1989-ish. Oh, wait a minute. I'm getting a little ahead of myself.
Yeah, you just jumped like 20 years.
I was in Eretz Yisrael in 1986 in Yeshiva's Teres Emes in Yerushalayim on Rechav Yirmiyahu for a year and a half. That's a Chabad yeshiva there. Followed by London, England, Yeshiva on Kingsley Way.
Wow.
That was followed by a couple years in Australia, followed by 770 and Smicha, followed by marriage.
Wow. So you really have been all over the place. How long were you in Australia for?
I think it was about 2 years.
2 years.
They say join Lubavitch and see the world.
Yeah, and your siblings are also. I mean, we'll get to Yisroel in a bit, but we know that he's in San Diego. But your siblings are also out on shlichus.
Yeah. Most of my siblings are spread around the world, and my father and our family was based in Brooklyn. My father was assistant principal at Beis Yaakov of Borough Park for like 40 years.
Oh,
together
wow.
with Rabbi Usher Enreich, about 2,000 students there. So we grew up in a chinuch-oriented family. He was also the producer of Story Time with Uncle Yossi, the very first Jewish children's story tapes. Sarah, pick up that dime, and or don't pick up that dime, and the big barrel of wine. And he also ran a Jewish radio program called Tzivos Hashem on the Air for 10 years between the 80s, which I think there was like 510 episodes of, one after the other, every week, Tuesday at 6:30 on WHBI.
Wow, I was actually a member of Tzivos Hashem back in the day.
Oh, wow, look at that.
I just remember it was really cool. I remember we used to get these kits, and I don't know if it was every week or two, we get something in the mail, and it was very exciting. You had your membership card, and the more mitzvahs you did, the higher ranked you got. It was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, you remember the matzah ball contests with the prizes? You know, you clean for Pesach, and your parents sign that you cleaned. You get some prizes, things like that.
Maybe. I was very young. I mean, I don't know, 9, 10, 11 was. But I remember being very proud walking around with my Tzivos Hashem card.
Yes, yeah.
Wow, so your father, 40 years of principal, and the first Jewish stories. So is his stories available today? Like, can you?
Yeah. In fact, I must just recently had them converted over to a format that could be used on Audible.com. Audible was purchased recently by Amazon. They do audiobooks or books on tape.
Right.
So now you could stream them from your phone or stream them in your car or from your computers. And all his stories, there are like 50 of them that are on Audible. They're broken into 3 books. It's called Uncle Yossi's Big Book of Stories, Volume 1, 2, and 3. Amazing.
And you know, it's funny. And this is a good segue into, I mean, we'll talk about how you got into, I guess, there's shlichus, but then there's also your business career. Shlichus, I think it's understandable how you got into that. But in terms of business, you found a really, really awesome niche. And I don't know if it started with your father's project or there's something you're doing now, but you're taking incredible content that, you know, probably so many people have such incredible memories of, and you're making it available to now share with their own children. So you just talked about how you took your father's stories, you know, from the 70s or 80s, and now you're putting them on Audible. And I think you also have it in book form.
Yes. We have 3 volumes printed in book form. we published them, and Feldheim is helping distribute them, and they're on Amazon.com as well as all our other materials.
Amazing. I mean, I'll tell the audience that when you were here, you actually left me some copies of some of the books, Jewish Living and the Chelm book, The Silly World of Chelm, which I grew up, reading them in the Jewish press. That was like the first thing I went to. And my wife, she told me to tell her, I told her I was going to be interviewing you, and she said, make sure he knows how much we appreciate that book and how she reads it to the kids every night and how much they love it. So, I'm chapping nachas from this because, this is something I read as a kid, and now my own children are enjoying these stories. And if it wasn't for you, all these Chelm stories would be sitting still in the dust.
Yeah,
and I just want to point out that, hopefully the our listeners will check it out. But you do top quality stuff. These are not junk books. Like, these are really beautiful. Every project that you've done, and I've seen a lot of your books and stuff, everything's done as first class style, which which is really amazing. So tell me, how did you get into this? Did it start as a project? How did you get into the Jewish Learning Group? What was the first thing you published? And was the goal really to take existing content and sort of bring it back for the next generation?
So that's a great question. So it started from music side of things. At about age 19, I started patching around on the keyboard and noticed that I wanted to learn how to play music. And our family was always musical. My father played, albeit without reading notes, just sitting at the piano and playing by ear. And some of my brothers played by ear. We had a piano in the living room that we all kind of futzed around on. And it wasn't until I finished most of yeshiva that the Yamahas started coming out, a little more sophisticated keyboards where you can make some beats and are able to even mimic some of the popular music at the time, like Avram Fried, Mordechai David, the Rabbi's Sons, things like that. And that was fun for me. And one summer in camp, I brought along with me a small computer. Well, it was big in that time. It was this huge CPU and a huge monitor, but it was small compared to what the studios were using. And this program called Master Tracks Pro, which lets you have 64 tracks on the screen, and then you connect your computer to it, and then you could build tracks starting with bass, then guitar, then keyboards, and then rhythm, and then add some strings and trumpets and things like that. And I just had a lot of fun recreating some of the tracks from, at the time it was Avram Fried's Adarabba tape. And I realized that this is not just fun, I was good at it. And I had these karaoke tracks that the kids would come and the staff members would come and sing over, and we used them for choir day on visiting day in camp.
What camp was this?
And the Gan Yisrael in Montreal, Camp Gan Yisrael. And then from there, it just blossomed to where I said, wait a minute, I don't need to copy other tracks. I could start my own and do something from scratch once I figured out the methodology, how music was kind of built. And so I put out the first Chabad Classics, Volume 1. It was just a collection of favorite Chabad tunes, or Chabad Classics, hence the name. And I sold it through a Deret at the time. It was in cassette. And I remember Shlomo Simcha at the time said to me, he was running as a rep with a company called Sinram in Toronto or Canada somewhere that was doing duplication. He says, nowadays everything is also on CD-ROM, on audio CD. I think it would be very, very appropriate to also put this on audio CD. And so I produced not just the cassette, but also CD, and that kind of started the Chabad Classics series, which ended up being 250 tracks over 15 albums.
Wow.
Over about a 10-year period or 15-year period. And along the way, I had guest artists like Andy Statman, who's on Chabad Classics 2 and Chabad Classics 4, Yoran Gershavsky, who did some overdubs on Chabad Classics 1, and then we did some solo albums together, like Totally Hasidic, A Niggin' Is Forever, my first Nigunim 1 and 2. And then Yisrael Lam, I hired to help orchestrate. And once I had a body music together, I had his help me take a lot of the arrangements and then create some new arrangements for a symphony. And we did this major symphony in 2002 in the Hammerstein Ballroom in Manhattan called the Chabad Centennial Symphony, 60-piece orchestra playing 250 years of Chabad classical works. And it was just an awesome span between, a chintzy keyboard in my room on top of the canteen in camp, all the way to the Hammerstein Ballroom.
Wow.
But it was a great ride, and I wouldn't say those first albums were very high quality, but they had a simplicity to them, and I certainly wouldn't have released an album like that today. But I think everybody says that when they look back at their work. But I'm glad I did do them. So that was kind of my opening, was through the music. And that's kind of started my
So interesting. Was that a one-time event?
Yes. Yeah. My friends say to me, "No, Zalman, when you're doing the next centennial?" And I said, the next 100 years. Yeah.
Wow.
It was actually very mazeldik because that was right after September 11th, and Broadway was dark, and the musicians were out of work, and nobody was doing any productions at the time, and the halls were empty. They were hungry for events. So
you got a good price on the on Hammerstein Ballroom?
From the ballroom to the musicians to the camera crew that did live from Lincoln Center to the director Howard Heller, who did an amazing job recording the event and doing a live cut of the event as the event went on, which we ended up using, making a DVD out of. In fact, it's on iTunes now. If you go on iTunes and go to type in Chabad Music or Chabad Centennial, you'll get to see, I think it's a 2-hour program or an hour and a half program of the whole symphony. It was just a great moment that had Avram Fried over there. Wow. We had this Russian group do a little takeout. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. So
a lot of people show up?
Yeah, we had a little over 2,000 people.
Wow.
With a line around the block of people waiting to get in, and we ended up having to write tickets by hand for standing room.
Wow. Wow.
It was great. It was a lot of fun. And I should say that the chutzpah to pull off such a thing really started in Russia. I was learning in 770, and one day Moshe Slunim from Ezer Sachim, which was a group in Crown Heights who used to help the Russian Jews behind the Iron Curtain, he came in, and this is 1992-ish. Mm-hmm. He said, anybody interested in going to Russia, we're sending some Bachrim over, because just then it was the Iron Curtain began to fall, and there was more access to shuls and communities, and they wanted to send some Bachrim to help teach Aleph Beis and Moda'ani and basic beliefs of Yiddishkeit. And I put my name on the list, and I ended up being sent to Minsk, which I spent about 6 months there. And while I was there...
6 months? They sent a Bacher to Minsk for 6 months?
Yeah. There was 10 of us, and they split us into pairs of 2. And they said, here's $200, a box of food, and good luck.
Oh my gosh. How old were you then?
I was 21, 22.
Wow.
Somewhere in that range. And I must say it was the best experience of my life. I mean, first of all, the experience of being on your own and having that responsibility makes you grow up very quick.
Sure. Not
knowing the language forces you to learn the language. And also not being in your comfortable bed in the comfortable, clean home, but in the back roads of Russia. At the time, it was very poor and very difficult. And you grow up quick. At the same time, you realize the value that you're providing to the Yidden there. And it's very meaningful work. But then you also learn some chutzpah if you're up to it, into what you could pull off. So, the few dollars we had, I rented out the Minsk Circus, which is this huge block-long circus theater where they have these big shows. 3,000 people come in, and they have acrobats and beers and, animals. Right. And I rented it out for Hanukkah, and then we hired this steel worker to make a huge menorah, 20-foot menorah, and we put out advertisements all over, free Jewish concerts for Jews, a day of Jewish unity and pride. and the place was packed.
Wow.
And
with Jews?
With Jews. Well, hopefully it was mostly Jews.
Right.
And Avram Fried was doing a 10-city tour of Russia during that Hanukkah. And he stopped by that night and performed in Minsk.
Wow.
And when I saw how it's, by the way, the video of that I just recently found and digitized and put it on YouTube, so you can find it if you type in Minsk or Minsk Hanukkah or Zalman Goldstein.
I'll put the video in the show notes.
Yeah, but when I came home from that and I saw how relatively easy, at least for me, it was to pull off such an event, I said, this is doable. You don't need a team, a whole company of people to do this. If you're tenacious and if you're organized and if you know what you're doing and you just go with some determination and smarts, the sky's the limit. So that's kind of how the Chabad Centennial Symphony came about. I said, let's try this in America.
Wow.
And so that was that piece over there.
Amazing. So talk us through. So when did you become more official? So you did the
okay. So I did the music, and then for a period of time, I was helping with Chabad of Deerfield Beach in Florida. I was living in Florida for a bit, and I was looking to supplement our income. And I was thinking, what can we do that's practical for other people that's not music? My brother Aaron, my oldest brother, our oldest sibling, he runs Chabad of Ann Arbor, Michigan on the University of Michigan campus for about 45 years or so.
Wow.
And he published, basically really photocopied a little yellow booklet called Shabbos Miros. It has a picture of Chalas on the cover, and inside is just basically photocopied out of the Siddur. Shalom Aleichem, Eshes Chayil, Kiddush. Out of Tehillim, he cut out some nigunim like Yifrach B'Yamav of Rachel Karnei, or different songs that were known, at least in the Chabad circles. And then some others, Miros, and then benching, and he would use it Friday night at his table. And it was wonderful, but it looked like a schlock job, just copy and paste, something you would do in camp or in school. So I thought, how about if I retypeset this and make it something official and pretty? Excuse me. I was sure that shluchim around the world will find it useful.
Right.
So at the time, there was this software program called Dagesh.
I remember Dagesh.
In Israel.
Yeah.
And I sat down and I painstakingly typed out whatever I could get from their clip text, and then I typed out the rest. I put the same thing, starting with Shalom Aleichem, Kiddush, benching, Shalosh Shodis, the Shabbos day, Yom Tov, and then 150 songs, Hebrew songs with English. And the Chiddush was that it had English transliteration.
Were you the first one to do that?
I was the first one to do that for Chabad material, the Chabad Nusach.
Okay.
And I published it as the Shabbos Table Companion. And I thought, we'll sell a couple of thousand and that will be it. But it's now almost 20 years, and we've sold over 100,000 of them.
Wow.
As far as I know, it's, from what I'm told from the distributors, it's the best-selling Jewish title in the past 15, 20 years in the Jewish world.
Wow.
And I totally didn't expect that. I mean, it's still selling today. You go on Amazon, you type Shabbos Table Companion, or go to our website, and they keep sending me replenishment alert. You need to send more.
Wow.
So that when I did that, I said, okay, what's next? I mean, a Yid is a mahalach. We don't sit still.
Right.
Especially somebody who grew up in my home. The Goldsteins are always active. So that was followed by a Shabbos Synagogue Companion, where I took main prayers that are done in Shabbos davening, and I transliterated them. So like L'chuna Ranana, Lecha Deidi, Shiro Lashem, Shema Yisrael, Aleinu, Haidu, Baruch Shamar, Ashrei, Yishtabach, things like that.
Yeah.
Made transliterations. And then for the rest, I wrote little phrases about what the tefillah is about, where it's from, what it means. And the intention was it's a small companion that in the Chabad House, you give it to your Mespalel to hold alongside his siddur, and it helps him learn Pirush HaMilos, it helps him learn the background of the tefillos. Instead of sitting there and just looking at the walls or not feeling connected, they had something that drew them into the service. So that was called the Shabbat Synagogue Companion. Then I did the same thing for the Machzer, for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Wow.
Then I did a
And this is like
complete,
you would physically typeset it yourself?
yeah, physically typeset it myself. I would
Wow.
work on the graphics for the cover. At first, I started with Shalom Greenswag, for those who were in music production, cover production back then, remember the name. And then Aryeh Friedman, who was his apprentice, who ended up going on his own. And then after a while, I picked up the trade myself, and everything in the past 15 years I've done from the cover to the inside, all internally myself. I ended up with a Photoshop and Illustrator, and I learned those different packages and basically did it all in-house, which helped keep the costs down. And then finding a printer who could keep a good quality was a little bit of a challenge until now. We have the same printer for the past 10 years, which has been wonderful, reliable, consistent. And so now I have, I think it's 16 different books. So there's the High Holiday for the Yom HaMorayim. Then there was a complete Friday night sitter. And then there is the junior congregation companion, which just has tefillos in big that are used for junior congregation. Then I did the complete Haggadah, which still sells really well even today. It was used at the White House staff Seder for several years in a row. It's a
Under
small
Obama?
under various administrations, because no matter who's in the main office, there are so many Jewish staffers.
Sure.
So our Passover Seder table companion was used at the White House staff. They sent us a picture of their table. It was so nice to see that, little me, and here's the Haggadah goes. It's used in the White House and in other places, in Australia and in Perth and in Canada. And there's one fellow every year who buys several hundred and gives them out with matzahs to friends as part of a campaign to raise awareness for the mitzvah of Pesach.
Nice.
So it's the first Chabad Nusach Haggadah that's translated and transliterated page for page, and it has instructions. And it's not rich in commentary, but it's direct and to the point, which is what people like. And then
I think that's what most people want.
Yeah.
You got to make an Ashkenazi and a Sephardi version now.
Yeah. And then after that, I did a Jewish wedding companion, which you give out to guests. I noticed lots of shluchim have stapled papers together. What's a bedekins? What's a chuppah? And what's a ksuba? So I did it in the same format, in a similar vein, retypeset, fresh material for that you give out to your guests at the wedding. We did one for bris milah, and then finally the Jewish mourner's companion, which kind of caps the end of the life cycle, which goes through illness, sickness, organ donation, end of life issues, proxy, health proxy, and then how to actually run a funeral, what goes on in a funeral, what to do during Shiva, Shloshim, Yortzeit. It has a Chamayrav in there.
Really, the gamut of everything.
Yeah, kind of covered the whole range. I had a funny story along the way. I guess people didn't realize it's just one person running this whole thing. I got a phone call.
One person, meaning you, did everything?
Yeah, I did the writing. I did the
writing, the publishing, the design,
the graphics, the design. I would hire out for proofreading and for editing.
Right.
Other than that, everything else is done in-house myself.
That's insane.
But it was funny because one day I got a phone call from the Western Wall Heritage Foundation.
Yeah.
They said, we came across one of your Friday night guides and we were wondering, can you help us make a sitter for the Kaisel?
Wow.
And I said, well, there's so many other publishers who are capable. There's Art Scroll, there's Feldheim, the Israel Bookshop, and Mosaic Press. And said, yeah, we called all of them and we not really getting anywhere, not getting any concrete results. And I didn't want to spoil their enthusiasm and say, well, I'm just a guy with a computer. But I said, sure, tell me more about it. And he said, well, we have tens of thousands of Yidden that come by the Kaisel every Friday night, and they are a little bit removed from the Hebrew prayers and don't know what the service is all about, and we need something that we could put in front of them that has some English in it, has some instructions, has some directions. Here we stand, here we sit, this is the meaning of this prayer. And we want to make a custom siddur called Siddur HaKotel, or the Kotel Siddur. Are you willing to do that for us? And I didn't even have to wait for him to finish the sentence. I said, of course.
Of course, sure.
Of course. I mean, it'll be an honor
Right.
to have a siddur that the Kaisa and Mashiach comes and the Yidden are gathered and they have a siddur there, and that I had some part in that. And it's just, of course. And so we worked in it together for about, 4 or 5 months. And now there's 20, 30,000 copies of the Siddur HaKotel that's wheeled out every Friday night on these stands, and they're used by groups and by tours.
Amazing! What a success!
Yeah,
wow.
It's interesting where these things end up leading.
Wow, so that incredible, and again, you're just blowing me away with how much you're able to accomplish and what one person's able to do when they put their mind to it, and the impact and effect you could have. So tell me a little bit more about, I love the idea of taking content and, a lot of it's okay. You did the Chabad stuff, but there was stuff, we talked about before that, how did that come about? Like the film stories and.
Sure. So after a while, eventually you run out. I can't say you run out of things to write about, but you kind of run out of things to write about, because I already covered shul, I already covered Pesach, I already covered the Chagim, the life cycles. So then I wrote about kosher. I had a book called Going Kosher in 30 Days, which became a bestseller. We ended up winning the Benjamin Franklin Award, which is a secular award given to books of excellence within each category, like religion or travel or sports or whatever it might be. We were the first place winner within religion amongst thousands of other titles that came in.
Amazing.
They end up asking me to come down to California to receive the award at their seminar ceremony.
So did they have kosher food?
They didn't.
Yeah.
But I did say they asked me to give a few words, and I did say after receiving the award, I said it was an honor to write this book, and it's a privilege to be recognized for putting it together and the way it was organized. And for all my brothers and sisters out there, look at the title of the book, Going Kosher in 30 Days. Today is day number 1. And hopefully,
always a Chabadster. Always a Chabadster.
So after I finished writing that, and then I started thinking, okay, where do I go next? So it dawned on me, my father, Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, like to say, or Zatzal, had a great body of work, mainly stories that he used to say, both from the Midrash, from the Talmud, that he would say on the radio or on his cassettes. And I said, wouldn't it be wonderful if those were brought into the printed form? And I spent some time getting those transcribed onto paper.
Right.
And then edited, and I put out 3 volumes of Uncle Yassi's big book of stories. They have about 60 stories, all the way from long sagas that happened to Jews many years ago to mashalim that came from the Gemara or from Jewish lore to Hasidic stories. And they did really, really well.
Amazing.
In fact, they did so well, I was glad to be able to fill up. When you start building a legacy of books or a library of books, so you have your serious books, you have your liturgical books, you have your instructional books, and they target different ages. So this helped fill up the need for a younger age for children. And then once I started doing that, I put out another book called My Favorite Jewish Stories, which was the best of Uncle Yassi's stories, with full color imagery, which I hired a wonderful artist. His name is Joseph Maya. Mm-hmm. And he brought to life a lot of the stories that my father said, like the Hour of Fortune, the Big Barrel of Wine, the Great Treasure, or the Great Surprise, the 10 Wedding Gifts, an amazing story with the times of the Baal Shem Tov. And in fact, that book did so well, Costco picked it up, and it ran in Costco for a couple of Hanukkah seasons. As their Judaic story gift type of book.
Wow.
That was a lot of fun.
So tell me because I want to get to talking a little bit about your brother and that incredible story. But just Abigazan.
Yeah, so let me tell you how we get. So yeah, giving you the long version. So when I finished with all of that, I said, okay, where do we go next? And one day I was walking to shul, and one of my children asked me, have you heard about Chalom? And I said, of course I heard about Chalom. In fact, I grew up on Chalom stories, and Bubby used to lay on the couch after candlelighting or read me from the Jewish press. The centerfold had the story, The Silly World of Chalom by Arnold Fine.
Yep.
And I said, yeah, what do you want to know about Chalom? She said, well, do you know any stories? And I said, I know a couple. If I could scratch my memory, maybe I'll remember. And I told her the one about the tzedakah box, where the people kept stealing the tzedakah box. So the sage advised them to tie it up very high and use a ladder whenever people needed to put tzedakah. So they would take a ladder in the shul and climb for tzedakah. But then the ganef would climb the same ladder and take the same thing. So it was like this typical Chalom story. Right. And then I said to myself, wait a second, where are all those stories? And why haven't they been published in any compendium or put together? So I started to make some phone calls, and I was able to reach out to the class family and the members at Jewish Press, and they invited me with open arms.
Wow. So what'd you do? You actually, I mean,
It was a pain in the neck, because a lot of these we're talking 50 years of material.
Wow.
And a lot of these were in not even in PDF or in text form. So I would say about a quarter was in OCR-able text form.
Yeah.
But the rest were just, I had to go down and physically take the archives down and take pictures of them, and then convert them to PDF, and then hire a team of chevra to type them out or to OCR them and then fix it up. But it was very painstaking to do the whole thing. But at the end, and there was so many duplicates too. So at the end, we ended up with about 150 Chalom stories, which now is published under the Silly World of Chalom.
Amazing. And I got the quality of the book. I mean, it sold out, you said?
Yeah, it sold out twice.
Wow.
And now we're in the third printing.
Amazing. Such a great book. It's so perfect, for nice, clean, funny, good stories to tell the kids. Yeah. It's Kol Kavod. So
and then once I finished with Silly World of Chalom, I was already at their offices. I said, I remember at Bigazun, the jokes that Arnold Fine used to put at the end of the paper in the back page on the bottom,
right,
every week. What do you guys think about me putting out Rabbi Yisroel? He said, "You're sure people will be interested?" I said, "I think so. Look, there's so much out there for serious material, and there isn't really a clean, kosher joke book for a frum house, or for any home for that matter, that has clean and tasteful jokes that you don't feel concerned leaving out on the table."
Right.
And they said, well, if you want to dig through the archives and do it, because hate, and it was literally a mountain of text that I had to go through. End up with like several thousand jokes that had, again, a bunch of duplicates, and some which were appropriate in its time and not necessarily made the cut to get into the book. But at the end, I think we ended up with like 400 books or so, 400 jokes.
Wow.
And I split them by divided them by category, and then split them across the two books. And one thing that I always felt from the first day I started doing anything was, anything you do has to be with the highest caliber, highest quality.
Yeah, and you could tell. I mean, I've seen this stuff. It's like
good graphics, good typesetting, good typefaces, good letting, everything. It has to.
I think I talk about that in my book. One thing says, if you're going to do something, do it right.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people, they have good intentions, and they want to do it right, and they think they've done it right, but the text is too dense, or the title of the book has no connection to what's in the book, or the graphics on the book, they gave it to their teenager to do, or it's such a shud because it's a lost opportunity.
Right.
It's a whole package. You do judge a book by its cover
Sure.
and its title, and you're presenting. In my case at least, presenting Yiddishkeit. When it comes to the more serious books, you want it to be respectful. You want it to
Sure.
be dignified,
Sure.
and it's also helps with the sales. And it pays to invest a few extra dollars to get a good art and to buy a fund or to
Invest
have
in the
good
quality.
paper, invest in the quality. You will never ever lose from it.
Amazing. So what's next? What's the exciting project are you working on now? Or if somebody wants to work with you, let's say someone has an idea, or they want to publish their own book, is that something that you do? You get involved in?
So I have two tracks. So I have material. Every time I finish a project, I say, okay, that's basically it for now. Okay, it's a wrap, and then something else comes up. So I just finished a very long project that took about a decade to do. It's called Jewish Living Simply Explained, where I digest a full topic, let's say Hashgacha Pratis, or the purpose of a Jew, or the age of the universe, or Torah mitzvahs, everything that is said about it, I distilled to one page. And I did it together with Rabbi Zelikson, who has an encyclopedic understanding of Hasidus and Torah Hashkafa, and it was very hard to do because it's always easier to write a big book on something than it is to condense, to have just at the tip of a teaspoon everything you need to know.
Living?
This is called Jewish Living Simply Explained.
Right. So that's out.
Just correct. So once I finished that, I said, okay, what's next? And now on the table is day-to-day Judaism. Basically, what to do in the morning. This is for people new to observant Yiddishkeit.
Right.
Shulchan Aruch is wonderful. Got the various guides on Judaism is wonderful, but this intends to gather together just the basic core ideas every single day. What to do in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. The same for Shabbos. And then it goes around the year. Erev Rosh Hashanah, what is it that I need to be doing now? So you have, the various minhagim, ataras nedarim, or shopping lists, apples, honey, head of a fish. Practical, just bottom line, like a basic of a basic Shulchan Aruch for day-to-day Yiddishkeit. Goes through life cycles and also through the months of the year and Shabbos and Yom Tov. It's a difficult project, but that's one track that I'm working on now. The other track is finding other content that's dormant. I mean, if you go sometimes into bookstores and you look at their old book sections, if they have one, there are some great English books from the 50s and 60s written by frum rabbis that are owned by various publishing houses that are now defunct.
Right.
And great material. And I look at them and I say, why is it just dead? It's I really loathe the idea of a content cemetery where content is just laying there and not used. So there's another track I have of trying to repurpose material with permission, of course,
Sure.
to give it a new life, to put it in the hands of the next generation. Maybe a slightly or very lightly rewritten, maybe new graphics, maybe a new format.
Right.
But
I just want to point out to the audience that this is like the genius in a niche, finding something, finding a pain point, finding a need. And, don't say, hey, why didn't someone else do it? Just say, hey, I'll do it, and I think it's incredible to, to be able to bring, again, like we spoke about before, to bring these things that are dormant and just, as you said, content graveyard and, and bringing it back to, bringing it back to life quite literally.
And a lot of times you're able to find great synergies because, for example, newspapers, they're busy with next week's issue. They don't have time to go and deal with the past.
Right.
Some are doing a wonderful job like Hamodia or others. They do put out books of their serials every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Like you would see a story that ran for, 50 weeks, gets edited together and put in a book. That's fabulous, and I support that a lot. That's what needs to happen. But there's a lot that falls by the wayside, and there are a lot of newspapers or other content producers. We're talking like Mishpacha or Ami and others that pump out great material every week, especially around the Chagim.
Right.
And then boom, it's just gone. Gets thrown out, or it falls behind the couch, and then it's lost. Who's going to go dig up one magazine to read something? But
Right.
if you're able to capture a column from there and put it out, it's really it's a service to the Ilam, and it furthers the idea of l'sakan Ilam b'machos shindalid yud, just to bring more kedusha, more Torah, more teichen out there, so that Yidden don't have to, especially teenagers and kids, don't have to start wandering amongst foreign pastures for entertainment.
Right.
You give them something good. And those who are seeking Yiddishkeit also are looking for some guidance, and we could put those out.
Beautiful. All right, so we don't have that much time left, but I do want to. You recently met the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. I guess that was not something you were expecting. Obviously, it was not for good reasons, although, so to speak, because of what happened to your brother. But why don't you walk us through from the time how did you first hear about what happened to your brother, and what was that next week like?
It was a whirlwind, that's for sure. It happened to be this Pesach, for the second days of Yontif. I was with my sister in LA.
Oh, wow.
And the plan was, instead of going straight back to New York, where I live, I would stop off in Poway by my brother for a couple of days, Monday and Tuesday, for just, hang out together as brothers and spend some time, maybe relax a little bit, and then I'll head back to New York. Mm-hmm. And little did I know, Matzei Shabbos, so first Shabbos afternoon, a neighbor came in and said he heard there was a shooting at a Chabad House in San Diego, but it's very little details known. There are several Chabad
that's
houses.
What you heard?
Yeah.
That's what you heard? Wow, that's so scary.
Yeah. So there are several Chabad houses in San Diego. We had no idea which ones. I said, it's probably not Yisrael. He's like a little luch somewhere in the edge of San Diego, 30 miles from San Diego, a Poway, a little hamlet. Nobody even knows he's there, and it's probably the bigger Chabad house, and hope everybody is well. And, we went through the rest of Pesach sitting on pins and needles.
Sure.
It was only a few hours because we heard this around 3, and then Yontif ended like 7:30-ish, 8 maybe.
Right.
And then right after Yontif, news started trickling out that it was, in fact, Yisrael's Chabad house. And so I was supposed to drive to him the following morning. Instead, I said, I'm not waiting for tomorrow morning. I just grabbed my stuff, shoved it all in the car, and I drove down.
You drove by yourself?
Drove by myself, went to the hospital where he was held at the time.
Like, did you confirm it with anybody? You just heard it on the news and you said that?
No, I confirmed. I confirmed. I spoke to, I think it was one of his sons.
Okay.
Or my sister, who spoke to his son. And I said, just let them know I'm driving down there. And at the time, it was like a lot of lack of information. And when you have a vacuum, you have a lot of misinformation.
Sure.
So all kinds of wacky stories I was hearing it's a 2-hour drive, 2.5-hour drive down from Los Angeles. So on the way, I was hearing all these wacky theories that Yisrael wrestled the gun out of the gunman's hand, and that's how he got his finger shot off. And another one that the congregant stood in front of him and took the bullets for him, which was also not true.
Right.
And, great, but I had no idea what I'm driving into. But I said, my brother's in pain, and I heard he's in surgery. I'm going to be by his side. And so I arrived at the emergency room, and they said, no, he's now finishing surgery, need to go to such and such floor. And I went there, and he was then, by that time, this was 11:30-ish around, he was in recovery room because he was in surgery from like 2 p.m. onward. So he was already finished that 4 or 5 hour surgery and was in recovery. And they said he's awake.
It was 4 or 5 hours just on his hands.
2 hands, right? Yeah.
Wow.
And I went in there and I saw him, and he was awake. And we hugged, and he said he's so happy to see me, and I was so happy to see him. And honestly, for both of us, the enormity of what happened that day hasn't settled yet on either of us. The fact that he's still alive, and the fact of the loss of Lori, and the fact that the Chabad House was violated in such a way was just incredible. it still hasn't settled on. It's still like up there, outside in the periphery, and eventually we have to make get to terms with all of it. But anyhow, I made Havdalah. We had Havdalah there, and then we were talking, and kind of from the conversation came out that we can't just stay here in the hospital and just be victims.
What do you mean you made Havdalah? Because your brother didn't hear Havdalah yet.
Yeah, and I just said Baruch Hamavdol Min Kodesh L'Chol,
and ran out
my car and ran out the house.
Wow.
And then we were talking, and I said, tomorrow morning we should really be at the Chabad House and open it at 10 o'clock and say we're back open for business. Nothing is going to keep us closed, keep us down. And then at the time, the media started calling, and Yisroel was in no condition to speak to them, under sedation. And even though he was awake and talking, you need to have presence of mind. You need to be coherent. Sure. And somebody needed to step in and be the point person for media, for the police, the detectives, for Chabad itself, for the family who's mourning the loss of their mother and wife.
Sure.
So I just said it's providential because these things come naturally to me. So I took over at that point and fielded the phone calls from different producers, from CNN, MSNBC, to the Chabad headquarters.
When that happened, how do they get your number?
It's through the ether. No, I mean, some of them called the Chabad line or called my brother's cell, and I had a cell, and I said, here's my number. And so it happened kind of organically.
Uh-huh.
And we decided tomorrow morning. We got the doctors to agree to do a discharge, not just against doctor's orders, but they felt it would be okay. He was in the hospital 24 hours. He's sufficient with the antibiotics, and the surgery was just on the extremities of him, like on the hands. It would be okay if he goes out in the morning. Of course, they would love him to stay a few more hours, but they supported a 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock arrival at the Chabad.
And this is what? This is Monday?
This is Sunday morning.
This is Sunday morning. Wow.
And so, meanwhile, the mayor came to the sheriff came to the chief sheriff came to the hospital to visit Yisroel, and some other dignitaries started coming. And then I started diverting everyone to the Chabad House, saying we're being discharged and we'll take care of that and any interviews after the Chabad House, after the press conference. And the intention of the press conference was, we are here, we are not going to cower, we are back open for business. This is the Chabad way, this is the Jewish way. And Yisroel was on board with that. And I must say, he gets such schar and credit for standing up to
he was so strong. I remember watching it. I remember watching the press conference, and he was so on fire, so on point, and so inspirational. It was incredible to watch.
Yeah. It's like I said, Yisroel, don't worry. I got your back. I'll handle the scheduling. I'll help you with the messaging. I set up a framework for him. I set up the foundation upon which he built an incredible building, and just came a point where I didn't even have to give him talking points anymore. I say, Yisroel, you're doing you digested it, you got it, you have it. Just run with what your gut is telling you. And after that conference, media conference or press conference in front of the Chabad House, we went to his home, which is about 2-3 minutes away.
Right.
And then one after the other, the networks were coming by, setting up. It takes them about a half hour to set up their cameras and lighting, and then they would have Yisroel sit for an interview. And that's where he really put his kishkis into the message. And it kept him in a very healthy, positive frame of mind, and frankly helped keep America in a healthy, positive frame of mind.
Sure.
At one point over the course of the days, I mean, right now it's all a blur. Sunday bled into Monday, into Tuesday, into Wednesday. It's still a blur for me, and I have to sit down and write it all out to try to recapture some of the moments.
Right.
But one of the things along the day, as the days went on, there was High Lifeline reached out from Los Angeles, or the lead, or from New York. I don't remember where the call came from, and said, we're here to support the community. If necessary, we could send a team down for grief counseling, PTSD, and all of that. And I helped make that happen within the shul for the members and for Laurie's family. But while I was on the phone to one of their professionals, I said, "Tell me, is it healthy and okay for Yisroel to be saying this story over and over and over again, or is he re-traumatizing himself every time he gives another interview?"
Wow.
And the expert said, on the contrary, those who clam up and don't speak have the longest term damage and the longest term trauma from it. The fact that he's speaking it and saying it over and over and over again is extremely beneficial long term for him. It's almost like 40 therapy sessions, type of thing.
Right.
And
so what happened with the then there was a story, I don't know if it happened Monday or Tuesday, that the president called him, supposed to be a couple of minutes, and ended up being like a 15-minute conversation. Yeah. How did that
so happen? I think it was Tuesday. We were in the middle of doing an interview with ABC News. Yisroel was sitting on the couch talking to the anchor, and my phone started ringing on silent. It was vibrating with a call from Washington with a 202 area code. So there were lots of reporters calling from there, so I just let it go to voicemail, and then I went off to the side to listen to the voicemail so as not to disturb the set. And I hear, "Hi, this is the White House operator. We're trying to connect a call from the president."
Oh my Goldstein. You made the president go to voicemail? Oh my gosh.
So, and then, please call us back so we could schedule the call.
So they actually left a phone number that you called back?
Yes.
So you called back this number. How do they know it?
First I stopped the interview. I said, "Guys, hold on a minute. It's the White House." And then I called back the number and I said, "Hi, I'm sitting with Rabbi Goldstein, and he's available to speak with the president." The operator said, "Okay, stand by," and then put the president on.
Wow, just like that.
Just like that. And it was like, okay, here's the president.
Your brother was like, what did you say to your brother? I mean,
I said, "The president is calling." He said, "Seriously?" it's not Yankee. We have a nephew who does great impersonations and makes everybody laugh. So I said, just take the call, and we put it on speakerphone, and the president was just gracious and just a real mensch. And it wasn't just a drive-by phone call where, "I feel bad for you. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for your call. God bless America." It wasn't that conversation at all. It started that way.
Right.
But it went into a real meaningful conversation about values in America, about moment of silence, about how families need to reconnect with their children and know what they're doing, and have a dialogue about the value of human life and how dangerous hate could be.
And your brother wasn't nervous? I mean, did he?
He was admirable. I mean, throughout all of this, he drew on
A real hero.
strength, real inner strength that can only be said is, that came from somewhere deep within him, or maybe far above him. But his voice didn't quiver, and he wasn't nervous in any way. I think it was all just so surreal, where you don't even have time to say, "I need to be nervous now because I'm speaking to the president."
Right.
From the moment those shots rang out at him from 10 feet away, 4 shots, boom, 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 and he's still alive. From that moment. And then from the moment when he came back into the shul after the shooter ran away, and heard the eerie silence in the shul, because really everybody was outside huddling and hiding, but he thought he's coming back to everybody dead in the shul.
Wow.
And so just think about that, from those couple of experiences, just that already took him out of this world, from the moment of reality. So therefore, he hasn't landed yet. So speaking to the president, or even speaking before, the American public from the Rose Garden, when the president asked him to speak.
So how did that come about? That was 2 days later on Thursday.
Yeah. I want to finish the point that he
Yeah.
didn't quiver or feel nervous because he transcended all of it. But anyhow, the conversation with the president was really warm and nice, and that finished. And then that night we started hearing from various aides from the White House, or it was, I think, from local San Diego government official that is close with Chabad, that there's National Day of Prayer that Thursday, and there's a chance that the rabbi would be invited to attend. So that's all the information we got. It wasn't like right away, okay, you guys are going.
Right.
And then Wednesday, I got an email asking for the rabbi's name and date of birth and my own name and his son, for just in case he gets invited to National Day of Prayer. And just so you know, Yisroel was in no position to travel. I mean, he was still in pain. He was such a hero doing all these interviews, and both of us barely slept. I mean, not that what went on for me is even incomparable with Yisroel, but we have like a deficit of 70 hours of sleep that week.
Wow.
But be it as it may, he sat for interviews and he says, I'm really not in a position to travel anywhere, but if it's going to help spread the word and get the message of and the positive, and get the Rebbe's message of a moment of silence and putting back values into America's children, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go. So I sent the info, and I said, Rabbi's up to doing it. And Wednesday, we got a confirmation that it's on and that we should book tickets. It was almost impossible to get tickets so late in the afternoon for the next day flight. But I reached out to Delta, who's Vice President of Media or Community Relations, got back to us right away and offered to give us passage on their aircraft.
Wow.
And they were very gracious about it.
Wow.
And we quickly packed and we flew up there.
Did people recognize your brother on the plane?
Yeah. We flew up there Wednesday afternoon. He said.
So Delta, they got you flights. They got you 2 tickets, right?
3 tickets.
Oh, 3 tickets for your nephew also, correct?
Yeah.
And so did people recognize your brother through the airport, on the plane?
Yes, from the moment we got out of the car at the curb to check in, people were coming up to him. I'm so sorry. This shouldn't happen in America.
Wow.
I'm Jewish. You have my support. I must tell you, Nachum, in general, I was so moved. It reminded me what kind of unique, special person my brother Yisroel is, that everybody within the Poway community expresses so much love toward him. I mean, usually you have a Rav of a shul, people kind of, okay, he's the rabbi. I don't know, some of them like him, some of them don't, some tolerate him. And, he has his own life. But here, Yisrael has this way of connecting with people that is very genuine and very warm, that builds a very strong kesher shel kayama, a very strong attachment. That when at the press conference on Sunday, when the mayor of Poway, who followed Yisrael after his remarks, said, Rabbi, I love you, we love you, Poway loves you. And I saw it coming out of his eyes, the love and the admiration. Pashat made me cry. That, he could have said that we feel so bad and it's terrible, hate shouldn't happen in our city. But he said, these are my only remarks. These are my remarks. I love you. We love you. Poway loves you. And I just saw that repeatedly from Israeli expats who live now in Poway, who come to shul, how they hug Yisrael and they spend time together. They care about each other. To the old Russian fellow who's been living there for many years and recently started reconnecting to his Yiddishkeit. To families, large families, small families, Persians, Americans, California. It was just so special for me to see how people connect with him and truly love and care about him.
Wow.
That it's just an indication of how much he put out into the community.
Wow.
And I remember a few weeks ago, before any of this happened, I just call him randomly. He's my brother, Hello, how are you, Yisroel? And what's doing? He said, I just got back from the hospital visiting a family. And I said, you still do that? You've been 30, 40 years on Shlichut. You're still doing hospital visits? He says, what do you mean? I love it.
Wow.
Somebody's in the hospital. I'm there for them. This is my tafkid. This is me. This is who I am.
It's very
And
real.
it's like,
It's very real for your brother.
yeah. And it's just very special. As brothers, we know each other really well, and we know our milas and chasrenis. But for Yisrael, it's just an area I'm just in awe in his menschlichkeit, his heart. He's just a huge teddy bear.
You could see it when just from the interviews, and you see him. You could tell he's a very warm, very special person.
He's genuine. He's not
very real.
He's not for his own covet.
Right.
Which is why people connect to him so easily. It's not about him. It's about the message, about the shlichus. It's about, So people were recognizing him on this, walking to the gate. Some people said, Rabbi, I'm lighting candles this weekend in honor of Lori. And it's really nice. I mean, at the end of the day, his impact was real, and the message resonated.
So there was about a 5-hour flight you flew from San Diego to Washington, D.C.?
So unfortunately, Delta didn't have direct from Diego to D.C., so we had to stop in Salt Lake City.
Oh, wow.
Which was stunning, by the way, arriving at Salt Lake City with all the snow-capped mountains and everything. So we had like an hour layover there. Okay. And then from there on to Washington, D.C. And even in the airport, Yisrael did an interview. 2 of them.
Oh, really?
One was
in the airport in Utah?
Salt Lake City, yeah. One was with a traveling Fox 5 camera crew and a producer that came along for the trip, and another from San Diego. And another one was on the phone from Eretz Yisrael. And then there is a Jewish from, I guess, a telephone news network. Kol Mavasser, I think it's called.
Oh, Kol Mavasser, yeah, sure.
And then he needed to pre-record a video for evening of Hiserus and Inspiration that was being done somewhere in California that night. They were gathering 1,000 Yidden together. So we kept trying to shoot. I was shooting on my iPhone from in the lounge waiting for the boarding to start, and we keep getting interrupted by the announcements. With passenger Shapiro, please come. And we had to find a small, quiet place, and finally got a 30-second video in. But yeah, it was a busy flight. In general, though, it was a busy travel itinerary. But we arrived in Washington about 11:30 at night.
And this is Wednesday night?
Wednesday night.
Okay.
And we went to.
Where'd you stay?
Up in
by Jared's house? Jared and Ivanka?
Of course. Yeah, they gave us their
they gave you the guest room?
The guest room, right. We stayed at the Hilton near the Chabad House. There's a Chabad House in Washington.
Of course.
And so we stayed at that Hilton, and then in the morning, so we probably wound up the evening like 1, 2 in the morning, and then 6:30 we were in the lobby for the 7 o'clock shachars at the Chabad House there.
Wow! Did your brother know he was going to be speaking, or you just participate?
We knew that we're coming as invitees, or just as guests of President and Mrs. Trump for the National Day of Prayer, as part of the group of clergy that are invited to
be in the audience
for this event. Yeah. So Shachris was kind of a thin crowd over there, just some of the staffers who work in the different lobbying companies, and maybe with the U.S. Treasury and etc.
I assume your brother was recognized there as well.
Yes. And he benched Gaimel over there for whatever transpired on Shabbos.
Wow.
And then I ran into some celebrity news reporters there, like Turks was there from Ami, which is always fun to be with him.
Jake.
And Shlomi Zayens from the guy who travels around to Saudi
Oh yeah, I
Arabia
just
and
read.
these
He just read
places.
incredible story. Yeah, he's nuts. Oh my gosh.
He popped up there for Shachris. It was fun to meet him.
Oh, that's funny.
And then, a couple of
I just read like a couple stories. I think from the Pesach issue of Ami, where he was
yes.
in he just went to these crazy places and just amazing.
And then from there, we had breakfast at the Chabad House, where a couple of Balabatim that were local to Washington came by and wished Yisrael well.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there was off to the security clearing area near the White House. They gave us a rendezvous address where we were supposed to go at a certain time in the morning. And we arrived there, and there was a White House aide who came out to get our group.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go through several layers of security, kind of like going to an airport.
Right.
A little bit more classy than that, but a little more intense as well.
Right.
And not too intrusive. It was just unfortunate in today's day and age, you got to do this. And then once we came in, they showed us out onto the Rose Garden, which is right outside the Oval Office. And they had rows of chairs set up, and the media was in the back. And then there was a stage in front for where the president would speak from.
Mm-hmm.
And all these different dignitaries were mulling around over there, and big machers from different agencies and other clergy from other faiths with massive followings, like 10 million followers and things
Wow.
like that, and coming over and sharing their blessings or condolence or asking to take a selfie. Or
Wow. I really asking to take a selfie?
yeah.
Wow.
And at some point, it was very hot outside that day, and then at some point, one of the aides from the White House came out, a Jewish fellow, who said, it looks like the president will be seeing you privately for a few minutes before he comes out to give his address to the National Day of Prayer.
Wow.
And just be ready. And then
so you're basically you're out in the Rose Garden. An aide comes out and tells you this?
Yeah.
And then what happens?
And then a few minutes later, he comes back and he says, "Okay, follow me."
Okay.
And so me, Yisrael, and Mendy follow him through this labyrinth of hallways. And contrary to what I thought, that the White House is a hub of frantic activity, it was very, very serene and high class and elegant and proper and very fitting.
Like a Trump property.
Yeah. And it was just very august and very nice, respectable.
Mm-hmm.
And came inside as we're being led towards the Oval Office. Vice President Pence was there in a hole in the outside room of that, and we stopped, and he spoke with the rabbi a little bit. What a nice, genuine person.
Yeah.
He was there with his wife, and we chatted for a few minutes, and he shared his support and his condolences, and it was just a very special moment. And then a few minutes after that, I don't remember exactly, it's kind of hazy, but
sure.
I think what happened was President Trump arrived from his residence or from wherever he was, passing towards the Oval Office, and he sees the rabbi, and he comes over to us, and Yisrael offers him his hand, bandaged hand, to shake. And they start talking, and President Trump connects with him. And like I told you before, Yisrael has this genuineness about him.
Mm-hmm.
Lack of agenda, lack of fakeness. There's no sheker.
Right.
So Trump connected with that, and he says, I like this. I like you. I like the way we're talking. There's something real about your words. And he even mentioned the way you've spoken and connected with the people. Very special. Come inside the Oval Office, and 3 of us went into the Oval Office, and We spent, I don't know, it felt like 10, 15 minutes in there.
Wow.
Just having a very nice person-to-person conversation. Very.
Who was in the room? It was the president.
Let me try to remember. It was Yisroel, his son, myself, the president, the vice president, a photographer from the White House, and a couple of aides off to the side.
And so you're just sitting and schmoozing with the president and the vice president?
We were standing the whole time around the Oval Office desk.
Right.
The president kept offering Yisroel to sit, but
really?
Yisroel was just remained standing and engaging him in conversation. We spoke about where we grew up, and Yisroel mentioned Brooklyn, and he said, we're in Brooklyn. He said, Crown Heights. We're in Crown Heights, Empire Boulevard. Oh, so we're practically neighbors, you know. It was just very, very
the president.
beautiful.
How was the president behind the scenes?
A mensch, just a sweet, fun, easygoing person. At least that was our experience, and it's so unfair the way he's portrayed so negatively by so many.
Sure.
Around that, my takeaway from the meeting was both from the phone call a couple of days before and actually meeting him in the Oval Office was he's unjustly persecuted, and not dissimilar from the Jewish people, you know. It's always persecuted for sometimes no good reason at all.
Right.
And just and he will persevere just like the Jewish people persevere.
Wow.
But a real man. There was good eye contact. There was warmth in his words. There was camaraderie. It wasn't wooden. It wasn't stilted.
It wasn't a show. It wasn't a press op. It was just being real.
Genuine. It was genuine, and I could tell what genuine is because I see it in Yisrael. And then I know the lack of it in people who don't have it, and the two of them really hit it off. If you could use such words, I don't know if for the president, but they got along. They spoke a very similar language.
Wow.
Which so is why it went so long. It wasn't just a hit and run. It was.
Right, so everybody was waiting in the Rose Garden, and you guys were holding up.
And they didn't pass around paper towels or anything, so everyone's soaking wet.
Wow.
And probably grinding their teeth. What are they doing in there so long?
Right.
But
so after about 15 minutes,
it felt like I don't know exactly how long it was. It was a decent chunk of time. It wasn't just a hit and run.
Right.
And then on the way out, the president remained behind in the Oval Office to review, I guess, his remarks or whatever was happening. And then as we were going through the hallways back towards the way we went in, Ivanka was there.
Oh, wow.
And she said, Rabbi, can I escort you out?
Oh.
So we went out together, which was a very nice gesture on her part, and we all went back to our seats.
She's, I know that she is, and Jared, I remember on election night, they went to the Rebbe's kever for tefillah.
Yeah.
And they have some sort of connection with Chabad or appreciation, or I'm not sure exactly what it is, but.
Yes, those who know how things work in the world usually make their way to the Ohel of the Rebbe and have a connection with Chabad.
Mm-hmm. Pretty impressive. So at this point, your brother still didn't know that he was going to be speaking.
That's right. He was going
to be called up.
Oh, wait a minute. No, it's coming back now. At some point in the meeting with President Trump in the Oval Office, the president said, I like the way you speak. I think I'm going to have you say a few words out there.
Uh-huh. At which point your brother goes, oh, sure, no problem.
No, at which point I think the word came up of what to say, and Trump said, just speak from the heart. You don't need a script. Just speak from the heart. And I totally agree.
Wow, because he spoke beautifully.
Yeah.
Really beautifully.
And
that was all off the cuff. After everything he's been through, this is now Thursday.
Well, I wouldn't say. Think of the 4 days before that is Chazara. Like we started with talking points on the Notes app in my iPhone that we used to have some focus points. Like Ma'ater Derchar B'Cheshech and positive, and all the Rebbe's messages and moment of silence and values, and the fact that it's not a religious Nakuda. It's not about God and Bible and prayer. It's about the Constitution, the rights that all humans are equal and we need to treat each other with respect, and those talking points. And the first couple of days it was necessary because he's in pain, and how much can you focus? But after saying it 40 times to various media outlets and really connecting with it and bringing it out, at that point he didn't need any script. I said, Yisroel, you don't need any talking points anymore. Just Trump was right. Just say what's on your mind.
Say what's from your heart.
Trust yourself. Trust your heart.
So what happened after the event ended?
So the event didn't end yet. So we're sitting there, and Vice President comes out and introduces the day, and then some other small parts of the program took place, and then the president comes out and gives his remarks, and then mentions Poway and the rabbi, and then says this wasn't planned, but I want the rabbi to say a few words. And Yisroel goes up and then shares what you all heard.
Right.
And then thanks the president for his menschlichkeit and for his time and his care. Yisroel said a very poignant thing. He said, I was sitting there on the couch weeping, and your call began my healing.
Right. I remember that.
And that really connected. President Trump seemed to be visibly pleased to hear that. Right. And after the president went in and everything finished, we went inside to cool off a little in the air conditioning.
You went into you went into the White House to get some air conditioning?
Yeah. Let me rephrase that. We were invited back inside to sit in one of the, I think it was the Roosevelt room. I don't remember the names of the different rooms.
Wow.
To just help the rabbi cool down from the heat. It was really hot outside, and everybody was sweating. Drink some water, and just cool down a bit. And then there was a couple of reporters that wanted to speak to us, and the rabbi passing through was Dr. Ben Carson.
Oh, wow.
Some warm words with us, and then we went outside, and Yisroel gave a short statement to the media right outside in the portico, where the president usually, on his way out to places, stops and speaks.
Right.
They asked him a couple of questions, and then we walked past the main front of the White House outside the gate, took some pictures, and then headed back to the Chabad House in Washington to have lunch, and then sit for another interview with another TV network, and then deal with getting back to California. And by the way, on the way back to California, we both stopped in JFK and stopped at the Oyel of the Rebbe to give an update, and then ask for a bracha, and to leave the names of the families, and to say some tehillim, and then Yisroel went off to California, and I went back to Muncie.
Oh wow! So you knew you were going to be staying in the East Coast at that point.
Yeah, and then that Friday, I got an email from the White House saying how incredibly wide the message of Yisroel went that day, and then there was a media aggregator. Otherwise called the media aggravator, but they gather like stats of how many people saw or how many people were reached, and it showed that there were 44 million people who heard Yisroel's message from the White House lawn that day.
Wow.
And
wow.
Yeah, and that was an international number.
Wow.
And then nationally was about 60% of that, or about half of that, about 22 million people. That's, I still can't wrap my brain about that, to be able to fathom what it means to reach so many people.
Amazing.
Bring out such a message of positivity before the world.
Okay, so what's next in this story? I mean, I know this can take some time to heal. Is there
the story is just starting? Really, the story is just starting. You should we should spend a minute or two about Shabbos and Poway. I mean, I wish I could have been there, but I was needed back home with my family.
Right.
The community the community Shabbos was just unbelievable. I had some siblings there that flew in from Australia. Some came from California, from New York, and they shared that there were about 300 to 400 people in shul, where normally you have just under 100. And Yisrael said he recognized barely 70% of them, in other words, 70% or 80% he didn't recognize, fresh faces. And some people drove from far away just to spend Shabbos in Poway to show support. And they had a Hadlakas Neris right up until Shkia on Friday. Hundreds of lights, hundreds of women lighting those candles. And then they had the Chabad Bachrim there putting on tefillin with people right up until candle lighting time, hundreds of tefillin. And then he said Ma'ariv was a combination of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Simchas Torah all together. They had some beautiful Bachrim Chazanim, the Rabin brothers who came and were Mesamech the Eilam. And they were singing. L'Chadodi went on for such a long time, and the women were dancing on their side, the men were dancing on their side. It was like a real spirit of Am Yisrael Chai the whole Friday night. And then they had this huge Kiddush with everybody arm in arm singing through Kiddush and through the meal. And Rabbi Simon Jacobson flew in from New York, who's a noted lecturer, and shared some words of comfort with the Eilam, and he was available to farbring with them. And then Shabbos Day was a repeat, and then at the exact time when the shooting started, everybody in shul stood up, and Yisrael opened their Kodesh and cried out to Hashem that this should be the last carbon that's necessary before the Geula, and that Shema Keleinu, Hashem Malakinu, and Shema Yisrael. Everybody called out together loud, Shema Yisrael. And it was just a very moving, cathartic, uplifting Shabbos for everybody.
Wow.
And then the question is, where do we all go from here?
Yeah, obviously
Yisrael needs to heal. His community needs to heal.
Sure.
He's going to be landing at some point from this whole surreal outer bodily, outer experience.
Right.
But we were both fascinated how we're pumping out the message, and then the world is actually responding. It's one thing to put out a message of positivity and a call for Torah mitzvahs. It's quite another when the world actually listens, and connects with Yisrael's sincerity and wants to do something different. And not just Jews, but also non-Jews.
Sure.
Want to do something better, something different, something more wholesome. So, it's almost like Yisrael, they talk about how we are all Avarim of the Eibishter. We're all limbs of Hashem Kiviyachal.
Mm-hmm.
And that when a limb is in pain, Hashem feels the pain. And when a limb is healthy, it helps the other limbs. When a limb is sick, it pulls down on the other limbs.
Right.
So it's almost like the Shluchim network and all the rabbis and all the Yidden around the world, we're all part of one body, one structure. So, Yisrael could be calling out a direction, but everybody else is actuating it with their actions. The mind says go, and the foot moves, and the arm lifts up. Right. So through Yisrael's call, all of these rabbanim and rabbis and leaders around the world and even regular folks are stepping up and doing something, either by starting new mitzvahs or increasing.
Has there been talk about a new or specific project, something that's more everlasting or more organized?
Yes. So there are various threads that can be taken from this. Some of them are the moment of silence idea, or moment of quiet reflection.
What is that? That is in schools. They used to have a moment of silence, for people to pray.
I'm not totally up on the history of it, but apparently there was prayer in the schools, in the public schools,
right,
last century.
I think there used to be prayer, and then they said, okay, we can't have prayer, but we'll give them a minute for people to be able to connect, and that was taken away. Is that what it seems?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that actually ever was legislated or not, but at some point. There was a renewal for that in the times of Ronald Reagan, from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it just always was something that wasn't undertaken or didn't make its I'm looking for the right word for it, but traction didn't
Right.
gain traction. And the Rebbe always felt that when the values of society are bolstered, then the actions of society are more lofty and more humanistic, more healthy, more
Mhm.
in touch with the heart versus hatred and the rest. So the more we can reach children and have them think about we're humans, we are all created in God's image,
Right.
we have to live for something that's higher than just ourselves. Hopefully they don't go grabbing a gun and start killing.
Right.
I mean, it's not as simple and binary as that, but it starts the conversation. When a kid
Sure.
comes home and says, "Mom and Dad, there's a moment of silence. What is it that we believe in?" Hopefully the parents have the presence of mind to start a conversation about
You know
their
what?
beliefs,
Sadly,
their faith.
sadly, the way we see things going on, how things are going on today in the world, it's not. I don't see it happening. There's just too much crazy change and too much worry and too much. People are so sensitive about everything.
Yeah. Well, look, hope springs eternal, and we have a statement from our Chachamim that light eventually vanquishes darkness, and we see that as a truth borne out in our own history, from the Chashmonaim to the Bnei Yisrael coming out of Mitzrayim to rising from the ashes of the Holocaust. I mean, look, at the end of the day, those who are forces of dark are no longer here.
Right.
Albeit, you keep having mushrooms or growths of different forms of darkness in every generation, but light eventually does vanquish darkness. And we hope that the American people at some point, and the whole world at some point, realizes that when you come for the Jews, at the end of the day, those same people will come for you too.
Right.
Once you start crossing the boundaries of who's human, who's not human, who's worthy to be protected, who's not, eventually that it becomes like a sickness. It's like a cancer that ends up consuming anybody who's decent within that environment.
Right.
Like that famous person who wrote, first they came for the gypsies and I wasn't a gypsy, I didn't speak out. Then they came for the communists and I wasn't a communist. And they came for the Jews, I wasn't a communist, I didn't speak out. And he goes through a whole list. And
Yeah.
they came
Came for
me.
me.
There
There's
nobody
no
left
Right.
to speak out. So we are kind of like easier targets for some God-ordained reason. And then it's really, we are the barometer. Once it's like those little stickers they put on perishable package. When it turns pink, you know that it was out of the freezer too long.
Right.
When the Jews start taking on hate from others, it's not too long after where society will unfortunately start suffering more as well from those same perpetrators.
Right.
So it's worth it for everybody to get up and say no to hate, no to evil, no to a lack of education. And the truth is, this whole idea, this run from spirituality is really detrimental. Everyone thinks, those who support it think it's a run towards personal choice, a run towards freedom, quote unquote. But really, our whole country was founded on spirituality, on spiritual basis. Our leading forefathers of America were religious people.
It's true.
And to try
They said even Hebrew was supposed to be one of there was a movement to make Hebrew the official language of America at one point.
Yeah, and it's intrinsic in a lot of the symbolism within America. You have on the dollar bill, you have the eye that watches, and you have the Probler's Unum, and you have even in some of the early colleges, you have Urim Vetumim in some of them, and so
or the Harvard logo, I think, has something on there.
Yeah, it wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was something to take pride in, that we are humans with a higher calling. We're not just humans as in an animalistic sense of just another form of an intelligent animal, but we are infused with a soul and with a neshama. And when you have connection with that soul, you realize, wait a minute, there's something bigger than just my wants, my desires, my comfort. In fact, being connected to a more spiritual or a higher source leads one to lead a more comfortable life. Trying to wrest away spirituality from the American story is not going to end in a good place.
Right.
We already begin seeing themes of that coming up now.
Zalman, listen, this has been absolutely amazing. It's incredible to hear your story, to hear about your work. I think I'm going to have to break this episode up into 2 episodes. But really fascinating. It's incredible to learn so much about your family, about your father, about your history, about your brother. Really covered a lot of incredible things in this. So I want to thank you for being on this podcast and sharing your time with us. Obviously, complete refuah shlema, to your brother and to the others that were injured. And, I look forward to your next projects. And obviously, we're going to still be in touch. And I want to thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. And keep doing what you're doing. You're a light of joy and happiness, and you're helping lots of Yidden and others with Parnasa, which is a tremendous chus. And so you should continue, and you should have success in your own Parnasa and health in your own family. And you should be besimcha and be able to serve Hashem with true joy.
Amen. Thank you so much.
All the best.
Thank you for listening to the From Entrepreneur podcast with Nahum Kligman. We hope you learned something valuable and will share this with your friends. For show notes, archives of previous episodes, and more information to help you start and grow your business, please visit our website, www.fromentrepreneur.com. Listen, learn, be Masliach.